Hello and welcome to today's webinar. Good morning, afternoon or evening, depending on where you're joining us from today. Welcome to our webinar on developing language acquisition through topic-based learning. I'm Laura Rogers from Cambridge University Press, and I'll be hosting this session for our speaker, Claire Medwell. Thank you so much to everybody who has joined us today. I'm just going to give attendees a little bit of time to join the webinar before we get started with the session. If you'd like to chat to one another, please do use the chat box. It would be great to know where you're joining us from today. I think a few of you have already started commenting in there, which is great to see. So thank you so much for joining us. Today's webinar is on developing language acquisition through topic-based learning. And I'll be hosting this webinar for our speaker, Claire Medwell. While we wait for more attendees to join us, I'm just going to briefly explain how we are going to run the webinar today. We are recording the session to share with you afterwards, so don't worry if your internet drops out or if you have any problems or if you miss anything, just rejoin as soon as you can, and then you can catch up on anything that you missed afterwards in the recording. If you're having trouble with your speakers, we suggest using headphones or checking that your speaker isn't on mute. Your microphones will remain muted throughout the webinar as well. If you have any technical issues or questions about the session as we go through, please put those in the chat box, and my colleagues Megan and Bridget will be on hand to help you. Please also, if you have any questions for our speaker Claire, if you can put those in the Q&A box. And we will be answering as many as we can in a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. 7 days after the webinar, we will send you an email with a link to the recording and information on where you can find the slides and further information on the resources. If we don't have time to get to your question during the live session, we will be also providing responses to frequently asked questions on our Brighter Thinking blog afterwards, which we will share the link with you as well. Unfortunately, we cannot provide certificates for this session. However, you can use your email as proof of your attendance. That's the end of our introduction. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, and we hope that you find the session enjoyable and that you take away a lot of great teaching ideas. I'd now like to hand over to Claire, who is going to lead the session today. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you very much, Laura. Well, welcome everyone today to this session on developing language acquisition through topic-based learning. I'm based in Spain, where I've lived for the last 27 or something years. I've been teaching for all of that time. And I specialise in infant and primary language learners. So from a very kind of wet Spain, we're going to start the session today. There are I will be asking you some questions. So if I do ask you some questions, if you can write some of your ideas in the chat box, and I'll kind of filter through some of them on different areas that we can discuss. And then, as Laura mentioned, at the end of the session, I'm happy, we'll have some time at the end to answer any questions or answers you might have. So if you can write them in the question and answer box, if you have any questions you'd like to ask during the session, then at the end, I'll happily try my best to answer them. So without further ado, we're going to start looking at this topic-based learning session. So what we're going to cover today are the following areas. We're going to have a look at what topic-based learning is, exactly looking at a clear definition of that. We're going to look at a historical perspective. Now, from this, I mean, we're going to be talking about the ELT perspective, how topic-based learning came to be and how it's evolved in our line of work. We're going to look at what the benefits of topic-based learning are, both in primary, and we'll be touching on the lower secondary classroom. So for those of you who are also teaching secondary, we will have some examples of different topics we can use at those levels. we're going to have a look what kind of considerations when we implement topic-based learning in the English classroom, things that we need to prepare in our minds, material, thinking about our aims, objectives, we'll be looking at those too, and how to set up a topic-based lesson in your classroom, and hopefully some handy tips as well. So let's have a look first at some examples of topics we might teach at primary level. Let's look at the topic-based learning first. So basically, this approach stems from teaching English through a range of different subjects, such as science. These are some examples: maths, music, art, social studies, technology, literature. It could be poetry, psychology even. And from this, so many of you, for those who are perhaps certainly in Europe, you might know this as CLIL, which is Content and Integrated Language Learning, from which different topics emerge. And topics could include things like inventions, the human body, sport and health, problem solving, which would come from maths. It could be geometry, caring for the environment, and mental well-being as well. So talking about emotions and how children feel. So this is exactly what we're going to be looking at today. And we're going to look at topics within these different subjects and things we can use in our classrooms. So, as I said before, what I want you to do now is in the chat box, I'm going to flash up some little snippets from Cambridge Global English. This, I believe, is from stage 3. And I want you to just identify, right in the chat box, what subject, what topic is being taught in this, this page in the course book. Have a little book. What kind of topic is being taught here? So if you can start writing your answers in the chat box. I'm going to have a look now to see what we've got. Biology and science, body, correct. Yeah, this Alex, I think I've just picked up, he said senses. This is exactly what we'll be looking at. So it's obviously a topic is the body, and we're looking at science, and we're looking at, in particular, as Swana has just pointed out here in the chat box, the senses. So our sense of sight, sense of smell, sense of touch, the sense organs, as you're all now writing in the chat box. Thank you very much for that. So let's have a look. So if you have a look at what exactly is being taught here, can you see, for example, we talk about the nose. Think about this, look at the ways in which we ask about these topics. So we directly ask the children to think about the smell of the beach or the smell of their grandmother's house. So for example, we say, what can you smell? What kind of things do we smell on the beach? So if, for example, if you were my learners, and if I were to put on my teacher hat, which I have here, I'd be the teacher and you're my learners, I could say to you, so what kind of smells do we smell on the beach? Can you write some of your answers in the chat box? What do we smell on the beach? Let's have a look. What do we smell on the beach? I have one that comes straight away to mind. Someone said it as well. Seaweed, fish, sand, salt, the smell of the sand, smell of the sea. Yeah? So encouraging the children to give their ideas, to think, yeah, what do I smell? We're not just giving them information, we're asking them the trees around them, the air all smells very humid on the beach. Lovely, thank you. We can go on to, if you have a look at this particular topic as well, we've got, for example, 1 second. We've got, for example, smell detective, looking at animals, yeah? So dogs, cats have this amazing sense of smell, and they use it to find what? We've even got examples here of diseases, people, even COVID, animals can detect that. So this kind of investigative work that kind of attracts the children, it's very motivating for them. And then things like smells of danger, very, very important to talk about, you know, if we burn our toast, yeah? There may be a pan on fire, so different smells that can indicate danger. So yes, the senses. So let's have a look at another one. What about this one. What's being taught here? What topic is being taught here? We can see like a nice pie chart. What kind of topics being taught here? Nutrition straight away, food, healthy eating, yes. Okay. So this would be, we've got the food pyramid. Yes, sometimes, often it's taught in a pyramid, but this way we're doing it slightly differently, where it'd be more a food plate. So here we'll be talking about healthy eating. Very, very important at primary level to pick up on this topic. You could also, Shivani, I think, has just mentioned that it's integrated with maths. Absolutely, we're using a pie chart. We'll look at these kind of strategies and tools a bit later and discuss how they help different types of learners in our class. What about this one? What's being taught here? Obviously, this is a reading lesson. What exactly is being taught here? What would you say the subject is? Technology, bang on. Someone's just said, Maria just said technology, robots. You could take it to artificial intelligence. It could be a springboard for lots of different topics. But yes, it could be robotics, machines, artificial intelligence, all these kind of things that motivate and interest children. So choosing the right kind of topics for the children in your class. Okay, and we'll do one more. What's being taught here in the last one? What's being taught here? Okay, we've got things like all kinds of ideas here, like from global warming to planet, to climate, to the environment, the earth. We'd call this, probably in teaching, environmental science. So it would encapsulate everything to do with the environment. And it's dealt with in a very primary way. What we've got here is the song. I'm not sure whether you're familiar with this song, but it's a lovely song, which is called We've Got the Whole World in Our Hands. Some of you may know this tune, some of you may not. Obviously, this is a listening, but it basically goes a little bit like this. We've got the whole world in our hands. 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 And then you'll begin the next verse. So we've got our brothers and our sisters in our hands. We've got our brothers and our sisters in our hands, and it continues. If you were to teach this kind of song in class for very low levels of primary but connected to the environment, you could have flashcards, visual aids on the back, so they would be pointing to the brothers and the sisters. You'll be pointing to your friends, you'll be pointing to the moon and the sun. So it's a lovely song to incorporate lots of different songs. It's a song that Martha Louisa just mentioned. It's a beautiful song. It is Martha, and it's one that I'd forgotten about, and it's one that I remember really enjoying, in fact, when I was a child. So, and again, it's very easy to substitute for different words, and it follows the same, it's always the same, with da 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 da. So it's got the nice rhythm to it. So yes, these are all different ways of incorporating topics into the primary classroom. So just a few examples. So let's move on. The types of things you might see when we're looking at topics on a scope and sequence like this are something like this. You've got cross-curricular links like citizenship, health science, art and design. We need to teach topics in our classrooms which are engaging, which children enjoy, that are motivating, and they need to be age appropriate. So for example, with the song about the environment, it's very simple. I think that's stage 2 of global English. We wouldn't be teaching them about, for example, wind turbines or renewable energy. To be age appropriate, we need to teach the basics first, perhaps about recycling, for example. Okay, so here we have an example, slightly higher level, of street art and optical illusions. So things that your children could draw their curiosity, and they might think, oh, because in fact, this picture that you can see on the page is actually painted on a pavement. I think it's in a Nordic country, somewhere like Sweden, this one. So again, choosing topics which interest the children. We referring back to the food plate and the chart, talking about, as you said, health science, healthy food. This actually leads into another topic of malaria. as well. Lower secondary topics, when we look at them, go up, obviously go up a level. They're kind of more mature. So here we have an example of talking about their favorite music genres from 16 to 19-year-olds, where they rank them, again, personalizing it for the children. Okay, so let's have a look at a little bit of a historical perspective before we look at more examples. Now, traditionally in English language teaching, it began with this kind of presentation, practice, production model. So that it was very much teacher-led. The teacher would present the language, whether it be the past simple, whether it be comparatives or superlatives. They'd provide the model so they'd know how it was formed. And then production might be some kind of a pair work activity. That was traditionally the approach. Now then came about the more communicative approach, which is where topic-based learning comes in, as well as project-based learning, task-based learning, CLIL, which follows a completely different approach in a way. But the two can live quite happily together, which I think they do now in our teaching. What does something like topic-based learning mean? It means it's more learner-centered, and language can evolve more naturally as we teach the children English, as language does when they learn their own language. It's a natural process, and it's a process, it can't be forced. So instead of teaching the children the language they need to learn for the task first, it evolves through the topic. So topics become the vehicle through which language content and structures are taught, which is a very natural way in which language acquisition takes place, even in their own language. It means that we can offer more. It means we offer more opportunities for children to investigate, not just English, but to find out about the world through English. So what's the difference between young learners and secondary learners? Now, traditionally, and probably in many countries where you live, perhaps English has been taught for the last 20, 30, even 40 years, but it all began at secondary level, and then it's filtered through. And now probably in many of your countries, your infant learners are being taught English. But there is a big difference, and that's why approaches have changed. Because traditionally secondary learners would have a textbook, a course book, and grammar, vocabulary were taught through reading and writing, and listening and speaking were rarely dealt with. What happened? After years and years of language tuition, children were coming out of their schooling without being able to speak a word of English. So something was clearly wrong. And this is where a communicative approach came in, looking at a different way of helping children to develop listening and especially speaking skills. Now, with young learners, this was ideal because cognitively, they're still developing. Their literacy skills at primary still aren't at secondary level. They're still developing socially, behaviourally. So something like this kind of approach is perfect for primary learners. And as Cameron said in 2005, the main differentiating trait is that young learners learn indirectly and holistically rather than directly. So if we're to teach the children about, for example, how to form the present continuous, and first we provide them with this is the form, it will just filter over their heads. They need to learn within a context, and they learn it indirectly and as a whole within a context with lots of meaning. So this is where we come as well to motivation. Now, a lot of secondary learners want to learn English because, oh, my mum and dad told me I've got to pass this exam. I know it's going to be good for my future. I know it's good for higher education. That's extrinsic motivation. Now, with primary learners or even younger learners, they're intrinsic motivation. That means I need to get pleasure from the activity I'm doing. And if I like doing that, I will enjoy learning English. English at primary level has to be fun, age-appropriate, purposeful, in order for the children to carry on happily along that language learning path. So what do young learners talk about? Now, as adults, we talk about the cost of living, the cost of our heating bill, our work. What do, when you listen, overhear your young learners, what are the typical topics they talk about in your classroom? Could you write some ideas in the chat box? What do they talk about? What topics do they like? Let's see. Straight away, people got music, movies, birthdays, games, computer games, toys, their favorite games, Ultraman, not sure what that game is, Alex, but that sounds it, parties, sports, football, their friends, cartoons, family, lessons. Yeah, they may be talking about their homework, football, cars, parties. Yes, things which, music, their trips, there may be a school trip, food, movies. So we have to get into the young learner mindset, because it has to be motivating for them to want to learn. Their holidays, fantasy, children have incredible imaginations. We have to draw on that. Peppa Pig for the very young learners, lovely one. Okay, so lots of different topics that they'd like to learn about. So as Noonan said in 2011, they need to be real, age appropriate, here and now experiences in the English classroom. So how can we achieve this? Benefits. Any topic-based, any communicative language teaching means it's learner-centered. We're promoting independent work and creative thinking, which is what at the end of the day we want our learners to be. They're not just, as perhaps when I learnt language, vessels where we just open up here, fill the brain with facts, and that's it. The facts we forget. We want them to be able to make an opinion. We want them to be able to think. These are all the 21st century learning skills. We need to create a real need to communicate and listen in the English classroom. This type of topic-based learning, and I think very, very importantly, appeals to different intelligences. Now, these intelligence might be spatial intelligent, they might be picture smart. Children who have dyslexia, children who are on the autistic spectrum, learn through visuals. We need lots of visuals in our classroom. We need to remember these learners. Things like pie charts from before, bar charts, diagrams. These for dyslexic and autistic learners are perfect. They need to order things in their brains. Learning styles as well. Children might learn better from seeing pictures, others learn better from doing things. Kinesthetic children who need to get up and move about. Caters for mixed ability, because topic-based learning is a teamwork, it creates community. And developing these 21st century thinking skills, like the ability to interpret, to estimate, to compare, to sequence, to experiment, all these kind of elements come into topic-based learning. And I also think, and from where I investigate topics, it's an opportunity for us as teachers to develop, because we can learn about new things and then teach it through English. So it's a big opportunity for us as well. And also, very importantly, empowering our students, whether they're primary or secondary learners, for higher education, because we're teaching them these 21st century thinking skills, which they need for higher education. Okay. So if we're setting up a topic-based class, what do we need to think about? What things do we need to think about? First of all, what are my aims? What do I want my pupils to achieve from this activity? We're going to look at some specific examples in a minute. Are they familiar with these concepts in their mother tongue? Are they age appropriate? So by that, I mean, if we go back to environmental science, it's inappropriate to teach, for example, very young primary children about renewable energies. Cognitively, they won't be able to grasp this context, but they will understand about recycling. We can talk about what things we need to recycle. Can we recycle paper? Which bin do we need to put it in? We could talk about recycling plastic. So choosing age appropriate topics is very important. What skills do they require when I'm teaching this topic? Am I looking at the listening still, speaking, reading, writing? the thinking skill even. What strategies or tools can I use, such as bar graphs, pie charts, timelines, if it's something to do with history? And what kind of vocabulary do my students require? Vocabulary they might need to produce, or just receptive vocabulary that maybe they just need to understand. And then to think about what grammar I can bring in. What grammar is going to emerge from this topic? And we'll look at examples now. How can I teach the grammar through this topic? So let's have a look at some examples of a topic. So here's a topic: robots, technology. So if we were thinking about aims, they'd be here. So I think, well, in this unit, we're going to talk about different types of robots. I want them to describe and compare. I want to practice ordering food from a robot waiter. Again, a little bit of imagination here, creative work. They might be writing instructions for personal robots. They may read part of a story about a family with robots. And then the creative task of designing and talking about a robot. So first, our aims. What do I want to achieve through this topic? Now, any topic, we need to activate their previous knowledge first. So the first thing is find out what they know, your students. What do robots do? Students, what kind of things, what do you think your students might say if you ask that question? What do robots do? Now, they may say some things in their mother tongue, they may say some things in English. If they say in their mother tongue, what would we do? We'd rephrase it in English. But what do you think your students would say if I said to you, put on my teacher's hat again, and I said, what do robots do? What do robots do? Let's have a look. Write some of your ideas in the chat. So they help people straight away. Mina said, robots help people to do things. Yes. They fight, yeah, because if they're in a game, they'll be fighting. They make our work easier. Mina's saying robots work in factories. Yes, they may be assembling a car. They serve people. They help people. They help us to cook. They can bring deliveries to our home. Maybe they will in the future. Buddying, we've got here from Gina. Lovely. So yes, some of the activating that knowledge, first of all, is very, very important when we're talking about a new topic with the children. So let's have a look. So what about this one? This might be the next, for example, the next part. So personalising. I think being able to personalise, primary school children and lower secondary love talking about themselves. We have to relate it to their own lives. So for example, we could ask them to close your eyes and think about a robot, or they could even draw their own robot, which they then describe to their partner, so who is drawing it. So they could, for example, say, my robot has a big square head. So you could demonstrate the activity first with a volunteer, and then they could make it into a more personalized activity, a pair work activity. Now, as you can see, this is how the grammar through this topic emerges. It emerges because we can talk about the superlative with the robots. So here we're talking about which is the longest robot, which is the smallest robot, which is the heaviest robot, and which is the lightest. It could be the fastest robot. So this is how the grammar can be brought in through topic-based learning. Okay, so a vehicle through which we teach grammar. Lesson planning. How might we lesson plan something like this? Here, this is a reading lesson. So you might have the aims will be to describe and compare what robots do, to understand and talk about abilities. Can you see here now how another grammar point is emerging through this topic? And the grammar point is, as you can see, can. So what can robots do? Now, if I think about some of your ideas in the chat box and I go back, we could then draw on the children's opinions, that the ideas they gave us previously, and say, robots can help us. Robots can make our life easier. Robots can work in hospitals. Robots can deliver and we're suddenly teaching can in another way. Because often we talk about things that we can do. For example, I can jump, I can climb, I can play football, but we're taking it a step further. So again, teaching grammar through these topics. Okay, let's have a look at this idea. Now, this is a particular favorite of mine, where through a topic, we can then finish the topic with a project. And obviously, because this is about robots, what better than the children to design their own robot? So this is allowing the children, again, to become creative, more independent thinkers. And here we have the stages in this particular page of Global English Stage 3, where they can prepare. They could do this in pairs or in teams, or it could even be individually. This could be a homework task. And when they come back to school the following week, for example, to their English class, you could do a show and tell presentation where the children perhaps have drawn a picture of their robot, or they've made a model of their robot, which they can present in their groups or individually to the class. So this would be a very rounded topic-based class. Well, various classes. Okay, so if we went to very low levels, let's think about teaching the world around us. So this could stem from, could be the beginning of, let's say, teaching about the environment. And it could be as simple as what the children see as they walk to school. So this particular one is like a little bit of a poem, if you like, or a rhyme. And it goes like this. So up on the wall, do you see what I see? A little lizard looking back at me. So how could we take this a little bit further? If you have flashcards or different pictures, think about the animals and insects that we can see on a wall. So I've got one for you. For example, I'm going to put on my teacher's hat again, and I could say, up on the wall, do you see what I see? There's a little spider looking back at me. Okay. And we could do it with different insects. So it might be like a butterfly, it might be a fly, yeah? Any kind of, could be a snake, okay? And if you look on the other side of the page, we can see the kind of look left, look right. Can you see all the others? And you could bring in different animals, and I could say you, oh, what animal can you see? And this could be something maybe they see on their way to school, and we'll say, can you see a horse? Or can you see what do you see on your way to school? Perhaps you see a cat. These could all go on the board, or you may have on the interactive whiteboard, and children could talk about the things they see in the world around them on the way to school. So I could say, Ahmed, what do you see? Do you see a cat on your way to school? Yes, I see a cat. I may say to someone, do you see a duck on your way to school? Perhaps the children walk past a pond and they're lucky enough to see ducks. They say, yes, I see a duck. Do you see a mouse on your way to school? Probably not so common. Perhaps someone might see, if they live in the countryside, a rabbit. Do you see a rabbit on your way to school? So again, activating vocabulary and using a nice little rhyme through a topic about the world around us. And then if you look at the other side of the page, they can then talk about emotions. So starting to talk about how they feel when they see things. So for example, I could say, when you see a spider, do you feel happy or do you feel frightened? When you see a flower, do you feel happy? Do you feel curious? And this is you can see at the end of the page could lead to a very simple kind of like little project or a little presentation about what children see on their way to school. So it's in their immediate surroundings. So on the way to school, I see, and they could have a little gap fill, and we have flowers and a bee. And how do you feel? I feel happy. I feel curious. I feel surprised. So this is a topic about the world around us. At a very simple level, this will be stage 1, so the youngest of our primary learners. But again, talking about a topic. What can we see as we walk to school? Okay, So here's another, again, moving on to slightly higher levels. So talking about the world around us, but perhaps it's not the world around us, perhaps the bigger world around us. Because I don't think many of us live in a rainforest, although some of you may live near one, I'm sure. So again, things like when you're talking about topics, quizzes and surveys work very, very well at primary level. And here we have a quiz about the rainforest. This is a way as well of activating the children's previous knowledge to find out what they know or what they think they know. They can even do investigative work. Children love investigating. They like to be detectives. So embrace this when you teach topics in the primary classroom. And here, for example, we have about rainforest resources. So for example, they can think about which of these products you can see do you have in your home right now? So it's like, do you have coffee, synonym, bananas, a bouncy ball? And you could say, well, what do they have in common? What's similar about these? Well, in fact, all of them come from the rainforest or the material that they are made from. So then we could talk about processes. Children could talk about a process in English, and this is about how a rubber is made. They can find out about it on the internet. They can present it. We can use interesting sequences devices like first, then, next, finally, but at a very simple level with pictures to help support their meaning. Poetry. Poetry and stories are a favorite one of mine, but obviously when we're talking about a topic, why not then take it slightly further to literature, to poetry? And here's a lovely poem. I believe, I'm just trying to think of the author again. I think it might be at the end. If you can see that, yes, it will come back to me. But it's called A Visit with Mr. Treefrog, which is a lovely poem to use at primary level when you're talking about the topic of rainforests and perhaps the products that are there. And here we have the little Mr. Treefrog. This is a rhyming, talking rhythm and rhyme we have in this particular poem as well. If you have a look at some of the words, I'll read through a couple of the first verses. So it's A Visit with Mr. Treefrog. I have a tiny buddy. Treefrog is his name. He flew in from Brazil in his tiny toy plane. He rattles when he speaks. He's greener than green grass. He's a tree hugger. That really is first class. He has bright orange toes that wiggle in the night. He's a mellow fellow that does not like to fight. He dines on crickets and flies, and moths are for a treat. He's not the average guy you'll find on city streets. And it goes on. As you can see, there's a glossary where some of the slightly more difficult vocabulary, there'll be a synonym. So for example, a buddy is another name for a friend. But this kind of enjoyment of even just listening to a simple poem where they may not understand every word because it's not 100% necessary, but where they can listen as well to the rhythm and the intonation of the English language. Poetry. What about science through art? So even we could do something like this. This is going to be about the brain, but we found sculptures of the brain. And if you have a look at this particular topic, children are asked to look carefully at these sculptures. And the first thing I do is to ask them what they see. So children will probably be very direct, that they can see a baby in one, they can see a house, they can see hands. Can you imagine all the words they come out with? What I'd like to ask you is if in any of these you see a message about the brain. What for you would be a message about the brain from one of these sculptures? I'd like you to give your opinion. What message do you get? What does the brain do? Let's have some ideas in the chat box. So what do you think the artist's message is about the brain? Let's have a look. Okay. Togetherness. So yes, just the idea of being together, to be united. It controls us. Windows, yeah, open windows. We don't need to necessarily be talking about very complex things with the children. Children take that literally for what this is. We can take it to a lot more complex level, but they would talk about windows, they'll talk about a home, they'll talk about think, they'll talk about understand. Yeah, a house for ideas, that's lovely. I think Mike has said a house for ideas. Open our minds, yeah, open our eyes, yeah. Okay, so all these different things, being comfortable in our minds, yeah. Thank you for putting all those ideas in the chat box, they're really lovely. Okay, so moving on. So this would just be an idea of generating ideas, yeah, first of all. Again, it means that it's collaborative learning. All learners can give from the most advanced concept to the simplest concept. It's a window, it's an eye, yeah, accept all of their ideas. And then they go on to actually learn about the different parts of the brain through English as the medium, as you can see on the other side of the page. So what I'd like to do now, before we begin to wrap up the session, because it's going very, very fast, is I'd like to touch on mental well-being. A lot of the investigation which is currently being done about primary learners, adolescents' well-being during this dreadful time that we've all been through globally, through the pandemic, now we have war, has had quite an enormous impact on the lives of the children we teach. It's had an enormous impact on ours, but it's had a huge impact on their education and a lot of their social and behavioural development. Why? Well, a lot of children have missed, in many cases, even perhaps a year of their education. Many countries haven't had the opportunity to have online learning. Some have been lucky enough to have had it, but it has not been ideal. So this idea of children want to have fun. Children intuitively learn through play, from having fun, from being in a comfortable, secure environment. And perhaps through the pandemic, they haven't felt that and have had many fears. So I think it's an opportunity to talk a little bit about their mental well-being. So here I'm going to, those of you who are secondary teachers, I'm going to show you a little bit from stage 9, which is everybody happy? So this focuses on, for example, it's a topic, a text on Finland, where apparently they're the most happiest population on the earth. Often the Nordic countries are classed as being some of the happiest. So it's a nice reading text to talk about happiness, but also to talk about what happiness is and how we can achieve that. Where does it come from? And if you have a look on the other side of the page, there's quite a poignant message. And then the children would listen about actually how to bring happiness into their lessons at school. This could be an actual topic. What I'm going to suggest now at a very primary level is a story that I've written, a picture story for lower level primary learners about happiness and where we can find it. So on the topic of happiness, I'm going to tell you a story. So this is called, I actually have one, the magic key. So this is the first thing I show my students and say, this is the magic key. And I say to the students, what do keys open? So first of all, again, I'd activate their schemata and talk about what do they open. Here on screen, we have some ideas like a door, a box. I say, let's use our imaginations. And they say, treasure trove, a new world, anything they can think of is valid for what this key opens. So then we talk about the story. And I tell the children the story using these little pictures, okay? So the story goes something like this, and it's called The Magic Key. Once there was a boy who felt angry. He felt angry when he woke up. He felt angry when he was at school. And sometimes he got so angry, he said horrible things to his classmates, which made them sad and made him feel even more angry. He never smiled. But one day, he found an old, mysterious-looking key. For one moment, he didn't feel angry. He was curious about the key. He thought, it must open a door to a big house, perhaps full of games for me to play with, or a treasure trove full of gold and money for me to buy all the things I want, or a palace where I could be king. Or maybe it's a key to a portal to another world where I could rule. But he started to feel angry again, and he didn't understand why. So he really wanted to be happy like the other children around him, playing together and having fun. He thought. He went home that day with the key in his pocket. He was thinking. He wanted to smile. I want to smile, I want to have friends, I want to have fun. And so he decided to look everywhere for happiness. The next day, he decided, I'm going to try and play with my classmates. I'm going to be kind to them. I'm going to say nice things to them. I'm going to respect them. And he laughed and he smiled and he felt happy. You see, the key to his happiness was right here in his heart, to be kind and generous to others and to be respectful towards others, to open his heart. And so he drew a smile on his heart and realized that he was the key to his happiness. And that's the end of the story. So that draws us to the end. I feel like it's gone so very, very quickly. But I'm now available for any of you to ask any questions you might have, and I'd be more than happy to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Claire, for that fantastic presentation. It was a really great session. There was lots of interactivity going on, lots of great comments coming through in the chat box, which is really lovely to see. I can see a few comments now just saying thank you so much for a great session, and saying what a lovely story that was at the end there as well. So yes, we're going to see if we've got any questions coming through. Just a reminder, if you've got any questions for Claire, please put them in the Q&A box, because we do have a few minutes to answer some questions. One's just popped up now. So we've got a few coming through. So first of all, any similarities between topic-based and TBLT? I'm not personally sure what TBLT means. Do you know what that means, Claire?
Are we referring to task-based learning? If it's task-based learning that we're talking about, they kind of overlap. They become, so topic is obviously just taking a topic from one of the subjects we talked about and basing our lesson on that topic. A task is where children will have something that they have to solve, something they have to complete by the end of the class. So it's kind of like a task within the topic. So it could be, for example, your task is to, let me have a think, is to, so if we look about the brain, for example, the task at the end of that could be for you to tell your partner in a speaking activity in your own words how the different parts of the brain works using pictures. So that if that was the question, then it's a slight different, but they kind of interact with one another, topic-based learning and task-based learning.
Okay, great, thank you, Claire. So let's see if we've got any more questions coming through. There's actually a question in the chat box as well. Can you explain with the practical context the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation?
Yes,
so I think we did touch upon that in the presentation.
Okay.
Further thoughts on that?
Okay, so intrinsic motivation, I think the best definition for that would be you enjoy doing these activities that they do in class because they are fun and they're motivating. It means they get pleasure from doing the activity. It's fun. That's intrinsic. They don't have any other ulterior motives within their English learning, if you like, at that moment, apart from having fun, enjoyment, etc. from the activity. This is generally how primary level learners are motivated. So, and I think at primary level, if you're a primary teacher, that would be my main task. I want the children at primary level to have fun, to enjoy learning English, so that as they move upwards in their education, when it becomes more extrinsic in a way, because more pressures come on them, like they have to pass an English exam, their parents wanted them to get better grades, I want to go to university to study English literature, whatever, that's extrinsic motivation. So it becomes less kind of the joys and the pleasure you get from learning English, and more, oh gosh, I've got to pass the exam. I need to get my, I don't know, Cambridge Advanced to be able to study abroad. I need my TESOL qualification. That will be extrinsic. So improving your speaking as a means to an end, i.e. to pass an exam, that would be the difference. At primary, we're dealing purely, almost exclusively with intrinsic.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, we've got another question here. Can you please give an example of how to incorporate emotional and mental well-being into lessons?
I think at a simple level, I think we had various examples during the session. We now have in our hands, because of technology, emojis and emoticons. I always think this is one of the best way to start out with teaching emotions, just purely emotions like happy, sad, angry, excited, etc. So if you were starting out with teaching emotions, children need to know what the words are. So you say, what makes you feel happy? So you have your happy emoticon, you may have it on a sign or a flashcard. And children talk about those things, so they can give examples, you can make posters. This would be very low level primary. So then if you have it on the walls as a display, I could point to the happy emoticon and say, what makes you feel happy? They say, oh, I've got lots of lovely pictures here. For example, eating ice cream makes, for example, Varsha, I'm picking up names in the chat box, Varsha, feel happy. Or so that would be at a low level. As you get to slightly higher levels, where you saw the example of a reading text with Finland, who's the happiest apparently country in the world, stories like the one I told, asking them how, for example, if they listen to music, if you're teaching the topic of music, how does a piece of music make you feel? Oh, well, it makes me feel happy. This makes me feel sad. This makes me feel relaxed. Encouraging them to talk about their feelings, reacting towards something you present in class. Those will be some suggestions.
Great suggestions, thank you. I hope that answered your question. So yeah, now we've got a question about how to help students with individual differences to develop language acquisition through topic-based learning. So this sounds more like we're looking at kind of bringing differentiation into topic-based learning. If maybe there's a topic that some students would engage with and maybe others wouldn't be in a place to understand as much.
Yeah, I'm wondering whether, because topic-based learning, because it is so caters so much for mixed ability, because all children can engage with it on different levels depending on their interest and their level of language. I assume, I'm not sure whether they mean interest. It may not have as much interest value for some children as for others. If that's the case, I just think it's a case of always encouraging them and praising them for what they do offer if they talk about this topic. But generally, I think if we're choosing age-appropriate topics, then most children will be able to contribute at their level, which is fine. Yeah. Because within our classes, there are lots of different levels, and we just accept and praise them for what they are able to contribute on different topics. But I think if a topic-based lesson, if it was well set up, every single child is able to gain from it.
Yeah, and talking about sort of the age appropriateness of topics, have you ever experienced a topic where there are some students who really kind of grasp and understand that topic, and then other students who don't understand the topic? So I guess, yeah, was there ever been students in the same lesson who are just at kind of different ends of understanding, but on one particular topic? Or is it always sort of, they can all engage with it in one way or another?
Yeah, not necessarily. I mean, if I'm thinking, I mean, one that sort of immediately jumps to my mind is something like maths. I've actually written, pages teaching maths through English. And I'll be absolutely honest that I'm absolutely hopeless at maths. Now, because I wrote the pages on maths, very simple primary maths, I have to say, very simple primary maths, it meant I was learning things, which was good for me, actually. But what I'm trying to say from that is, for example, we have pages on time zones around the world, and children may have to work out, how many hours behind it is in different places, or how many hours forward, etc. I think there will be children that will be able to do that better than others. They'll be at a different level with their maths and conceptually being able to understand the idea of time zones. But other children will be listening. They'll be there listening in the background, and they will be taking in and absorbing what they're able to. That would be my suggestion would be, we have to touch on all kinds of different topics in order to children to push their boundaries and to learn about the world around them, basically, regardless of their strengths or weaknesses.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So another question, how do we strike a balance between sort of meeting the learning objectives, but also building vocabulary and strengthening grammar and writing skills? So sort of, yeah, how do we strike a balance between the objectives and the skills development, both at the same time?
I think there has to be a balance. I think whenever you're preparing lessons, there needs to be a balance. I think as teachers, what has to go through our mind is, if we're talking about a topic, I have to think to myself, what is my topic? What is the vocabulary my students need to know, or at least to receptively know, to be able to do this activity successfully? What grammar am I going to be teaching through this? For example, if it's a lesson with grammar, it might be, we had an example of can plus infinitive about what robots can do. Am I teaching them reading? Do I want them to speak in this lesson? And then every lesson is looking at that balance. So for example, you may realize for a week, you think, well, I haven't done much listening recently, but you need to bring that in. We have to have a balance. There has to be the perfect mix. And we can easily meet objectives by doing that, by lesson planning carefully, by keeping records to check that we are meeting the demands of the curriculum as well.
Yes, absolutely. I think maybe we've got time for one more if we squeeze it in. Any suggestions for fast achievers, like what to do with those students that finish the tasks faster than other students?
I think when it comes to, I mean, we need to look at specific topics, but I think the fact that it's topic-based learning we're talking about, there are so many options for fast finishes. So for example, if it was, for example, picking up on, let's pick up on the healthy eating, when we're looking at the pie chart, yeah? So you may have children which draw their healthy plate, because that's where they may draw and label what's on their healthy plate. Now, if I had a high achiever, I wouldn't ask them to draw and just label. I'd ask them to talk about, explain which, this is a carbohydrate. There are other carbohydrates. I'd ask them to investigate, perhaps at home, or if they have the internet in the classroom, to find out what other carbohydrates there are. It's thinking, how can I go beyond this? How can I cater for the differentiation in my classroom? It's just adding. It may involve the children, the fast achievers, writing more, get them to sentence level, get them to paragraph level, while slightly lower level learners will just be drawing and labeling, for example. That's one example that occurs to me.
Yeah, that's great. There's definitely loads of different creative ways that you could do that in topic-based learning. So it looks like we have reached the end of our session. Just as we reach the last minute, I will wrap up on what we've been talking about today. There has been a few questions about resources as well, and Megan and Bridget have been sharing links to our Cambridge Global English resources in the chat box as well, which is where all of the kind of examples and activities from today have come from. So if you'd like to read more about those, please take a look at those links. And we'll also share a link to our general primary and lower secondary hub page as well, so you can read about all of our resources for this level of learners. Remember that 7 days after the webinar, we'll send you an email with a recording of the session and let you know where you can find the slides. And you can also use your email as proof of your attendance to the session. And finally, when the webinar ends today, a short survey will open on your screens. So if you don't mind taking a quick 5 minutes just to complete the survey, it really helps us understand what we can do to support you further, and whether we can offer any additional support or contact you. And it's just a great opportunity for you to let us know in that survey. So that would be great if you have time to do that today. And finally, just to say a big thank you to Claire for leading our session today on primary and lower secondary global English. And thank you as well to Megan and Bridget for supporting you all throughout the webinar. I'm sure you all agree it's been a very interesting and engaging session today, with lots of great ideas and interactivity coming through on the chat box, and I've certainly enjoyed listening along as well. So thank you so much again to Claire and to everybody for joining us. Good luck with your teaching, and goodbye for now.
Goodbye. Thanks everyone, bye-bye.